Across the barren deserts of southern Peru lie massive, mysterious figures etched into the earth so huge they can only be fully seen from the sky. For decades, scientists, archaeologists, and even conspiracy theorists have asked the same question: who created the Nazca Lines? And why? In this video, we're going to unravel the mystery behind these colossal desert drawings and explore theories that might finally give us the answers. Welcome back to your channel name, where we uncover the world's greatest historical mysteries. Today, we dive into one of the most puzzling wonders on Earth, the Nazca Lines. Stretching across 500 square kilometers, these enormous geoglyphs form shapes of animals, plants, and geometric patterns. They've survived for over 1,000 years, but the question remains, who built them and for what purpose? By the end of this video, you'll see the leading theories and evidence that might finally crack this ancient code. Imagine soaring high above the endless desert plains of southern Peru in a small plane in the early 20th century. Below you, the land stretches out like a golden canvas, the sun beating down mercilessly, the wind carrying whispers of civilizations long gone. As the pilot adjusts his course, something catches your eye: strange, enormous lines etched into the ground, running perfectly straight for miles. At first, you might think they're roads or old trails carved by ancient traders. But as the plane tilts and the desert floor angles into view, you suddenly see it. A massive figure, the shape of a hummingbird, its beak stretching impossibly long across the earth, its wings spread as if frozen mid-flight. Beside it, a giant monkey with a spiral tail. A spider, perfectly symmetrical. Enormous trapezoids and arrows pointing toward the horizon. All so large, so precise, that it feels impossible they were created by human hands so long ago. This was exactly the experience of the earliest pilots flying over the Nazca Desert in the 1920s and 1930s. Before the age of airplanes, people walking across this land could only see fragments of the lines, just shallow grooves in the dirt, no different from paths carved by animals or farmers. On the ground, the designs were nearly invisible, too massive to comprehend without a bird's-eye view. It was only from above that the true scale and artistry of the Nazca Lines revealed themselves, sparking immediate curiosity and confusion. Who made them? Why? And how had they survived centuries of wind, rain, and time itself? The first person to bring the Nazca Lines to the attention of the wider world was Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Zespi, who spotted them while hiking in 1927 from the ground. He could only make out strange patterns and pathways, but realized they were something far beyond simple trails. However, it wasn't until commercial flights began soaring over southern Peru in the 1930s that the full extent of the mystery unfolded. Suddenly, what looked like random scratches on the desert floor were revealed to be enormous geoglyphs, some stretching over 1,200 feet across. And they weren't just random shapes. There were animals, birds, fish, plants, and perfectly straight lines running for miles, as though drawn with a ruler across the desert's surface. The shock of these discoveries rippled far beyond Peru. Photographs began circulating in newspapers and magazines, capturing the imagination of people around the world. The dry, arid climate of the Nazca Desert had acted like a time capsule, preserving these lines for over 1,000 years. With so little rainfall, less than an inch a year, the top layer of dark, sun-baked stones was scraped away by ancient hands to reveal the lighter earth beneath, creating a stark contrast that still survives today. As news spread, archaeologists, scientists, and adventurers began flocking to the area. Among them was Maria Reich, a German mathematician and archaeologist who would dedicate her entire life to studying the Nazca Lines. Arriving in the 1940s, she was fascinated by both their scale and precision. Armed with little more than a measuring tape and a bicycle, she painstakingly mapped hundreds of geoglyphs across the desert, fighting to protect them from erosion and human destruction. She believed the lines formed a giant astronomical calendar, with certain figures aligning to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Her work turned the Nazca Lines from mere curiosities into a full-blown archaeological puzzle that demanded serious study. But even as research continued, the mystery only deepened. Some figures were so large that creating them would have required extraordinary planning and organization. How could ancient people, with no access to aircraft or satellites, design something that could only be fully appreciated from the sky? There were no hills or mountains high enough nearby to serve as viewing platforms. From the ground, the builders themselves could never have seen the finished designs in their entirety. Yet the proportions were nearly perfect, the lines impossibly straight, the curves graceful and deliberate, as if guided by some unseen hand from above. What made the discovery even more intriguing was the sheer variety of shapes. There were over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 animals and plants, unrecognizable and others abstract. Many of the lines ran perfectly parallel or intersected at precise angles, covering nearly 500 square kilometers of desert. Some stretched so far into the horizon that early explorers joked they might be runways for alien spacecraft, a theory that, though dismissed by scientists, captured the public imagination and still pops up in documentaries and books even today. The Nazca Lines weren't just an archaeological find. They became a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of ancient mystery on par with Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt. Every new photograph, every aerial survey seemed to uncover new figures hidden beneath centuries of dust. Even now, modern technology like drones and satellite imaging continues to reveal previously unknown geoglyphs, proving that the desert has not yet given up all its secrets, that the discovery, which began nearly a century ago, is still unfolding, still teasing us with glimpses of a forgotten world waiting to be understood. Imagine traveling back in time over 1,000 years, long before planes, satellites, or even the idea of modern engineering. The sun blazes high over the Peruvian desert, and beneath it, a thriving civilization works tirelessly, unaware that centuries later the world will puzzle over the marks they leave behind. This was the Nazca culture, a people who lived between 200 BCE and 600 CE, rising from the arid desert plains of southern Peru and building a society that was both innovative and deeply spiritual. They are the ones most archaeologists believe were behind the creation of the Nazca Lines. Yet the mystery of how and why they accomplished such a feat continues to fascinate historians to this day. The Nazca people were not a powerful empire like the later Incas, nor did they leave behind massive stone fortresses or golden temples. Instead, what they created was something far more enigmatic: geoglyphs carved into the desert floor, so vast and precise that even with today's technology, we marvel at their scale. But who exactly were these people? To understand the makers of the Nazca Lines, we need to step into their world, a place where survival in the harsh desert demanded ingenuity, and where the line between the earthly and the divine was always blurred. The Nazca were skilled farmers. Despite living in one of the driest regions on Earth, they developed sophisticated underground aqueduct systems called puquios, channels that brought water from underground sources to irrigate their fields. These systems were so well engineered that many are still functional today, defying the desert's arid nature. This mastery over water led archaeologists to consider whether the Nazca Lines themselves might have been connected to water, perhaps as part of rituals or offerings to gods who controlled rain and fertility. For a people whose survival depended on the whims of nature, ensuring favor from the divine forces of sun, wind, and water would have been essential. But the Nazca were not just practical engineers. Their culture was rich in art, religion, and symbolic meaning. They produced stunning pottery painted with vivid designs of animals, plants, and mythological beings. They wove intricate textiles with bright colors and patterns, some so detailed that they remain among the finest examples of pre-Columbian art. Many of these same figures, the hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, appear both on their pottery and in the geoglyphs across the desert, suggesting that the lines were not random decorations, but deeply connected to their cultural and spiritual beliefs. One of the biggest puzzles, however, is how they managed to design the lines with such precision without being able to see them from above. Archaeologists believe the Nazca used simple but effective techniques, creating small-scale models on the ground and then using a grid system with ropes and stakes to enlarge the designs to massive proportions. By walking along these grids and removing the top layer of dark desert stones to expose the lighter soil beneath, They could create straight lines running for miles or giant animal figures stretching hundreds of feet across. What seems almost impossible to us today could have been achieved with surprisingly basic tools and clever planning. Yet the purpose behind the lines remains elusive. Some scholars argue that the Nazca lines were ritual pathways walked upon during ceremonies to honor their gods. Others believe the figures point toward sources of water or align with celestial bodies, turning the desert into a kind of open-air observatory. The fact that many designs can only be fully appreciated from the air has led some to suggest they were meant for the gods themselves to see towering deities watching from the heavens as humans carved their prayers into the earth below. The Nazca civilization itself eventually declined around 600 CE, possibly due to prolonged droughts or environmental changes that devastated their agriculture. As their culture faded, the meaning of the lines may have been lost even to later generations, leaving behind only the silent shapes etched into the desert as echoes of a vanished people. When the Incas rose centuries later, they seemed to have little knowledge of the lines' origin or purpose, treating them with the same mystery that we do today. What we do know is that the Nazca were a people capable of remarkable creativity and organization. They harnessed the harsh desert environment, built irrigation systems ahead of their time, and expressed their beliefs on a scale so vast it defies easy explanation. Through the lines, they left behind more than art. They left a message carved into the earth itself, one that still speaks across the centuries, even if we can't fully understand the words. And perhaps that is why the mystery endures, because to uncover the people behind the Nazca lines is to glimpse a civilization both advanced in its knowledge and profoundly connected to forces far greater than itself as. We journey deeper into the mystery of the Nazca lines. One question continues to echo louder than any other: why? Why would an ancient civilization living in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth devote so much time and energy to carving massive figures into the desert floor? These weren't quick projects. Some of the geoglyphs stretch for hundreds of feet, perfectly straight lines running across uneven terrain, massive animals and geometric shapes appearing with almost impossible precision. What purpose could have driven the Nazca people to create something that for centuries no human eyes could even fully see from the ground? Over the years, archaeologists, scientists, and even amateur researchers have offered theory after theory, each one trying to make sense of the mystery. Some explanations lean on practical needs, others on spiritual beliefs, and a few venture into the world of the extraordinary. But what makes the Nazca lines so compelling is that no single idea fully explains all the evidence, leaving us with more questions than answers even after decades of study. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the lines had a ceremonial or religious purpose. The Nazca lived in an unforgiving desert where water was scarce, and life depended on the seasonal rains brought by unpredictable weather patterns. To survive, they needed the favor of their gods, deities tied to the forces of nature, sun, wind, and especially water. Some researchers believe the lines were part of massive ritual spaces where the Nazca performed ceremonies to ask for rain and agricultural fertility. Imagine processions of priests and villagers walking along these vast pathways, carrying offerings, singing prayers, their movements tracing the lines as acts of devotion carved into the very earth beneath their feet. The giant figures, hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, might have been symbols of life, fertility, or mythological beings tied to their religious beliefs, each one serving as a prayer written large enough for the gods to see from the heavens. Another theory connects the Nazca lines to the stars. Early researchers noticed that some lines seem to align with the positions of the sun during solstices or with certain constellations in the night sky. Could the Nazca have created a giant astronomical calendar across the desert? The German mathematician Maria Reich, who spent decades mapping and studying the lines, believed this was the case. She argued that the geoglyphs marked celestial events, helping the Nazca predict seasons for planting and harvesting crops. In a world without written records or advanced tools, the sky would have been their calendar and the desert floor their notebook. The precision of the lines, she suggested, reflected not just artistry but careful astronomical observation over generations. Yet, even this theory has limits. Many lines don't match obvious celestial patterns, and new research using computer models has challenged some of the supposed alignments. Still, the idea that the Nazca were merging Earth and sky, carving cosmic symbols into the desert, remains a powerful image, one that continues to captivate scientists and storytellers alike. Some researchers, looking closer at the land itself, believe the lines might have been connected to water in a more direct way. The Nazca built sophisticated underground aqueducts to irrigate their fields, so water was central to their survival. Certain lines point toward mountains, the source of underground rivers feeding the desert wells. Some figures may have marked places where water could be found or honored the spirits believed to control it. In a land where every drop meant life or death, it makes sense that the Nazca would intertwine practicality with spirituality, creating symbols that were both functional and sacred. Then there are the more unconventional theories, the ones that capture the public imagination even if scientists raise their eyebrows. Some have suggested the lines were landing strips for alien spacecraft, pointing to the sheer size and precision of the designs as evidence of extraterrestrial involvement. Books and documentaries have popularized this idea, painting images of ancient astronauts guiding human hands or even building the lines themselves as messages to beings from beyond. While mainstream archaeology dismisses these ideas, the fact that the lines can only be fully appreciated from the air does add fuel to the mystery. How, skeptics ask, could the Nazca have created something so massive without ever seeing the full picture themselves? And so, theory piles upon theory. Religious rituals, astronomical calendars, maps of underground water, messages to the gods or perhaps to someone far beyond the stars. Maybe the answer combines elements of all these ideas, or maybe it lies in something we haven't yet imagined. What remains clear is that the purpose of the Nazca Lines was deeply meaningful to the people who made them. They weren't random decorations or simple art. They were deliberate, precise, and created on a scale that suggests a purpose far greater than what meets the eye when you stand in the Nazca Desert. The vast Peruvian plains stretch out in every direction under a merciless sun, flat and empty as far as the eye can see. The air is dry, the wind whispers across the sand, and the silence feels ancient. From where you stand, the ground seems ordinary, just another stretch of desert floor. But somewhere beneath your feet runs a line, perfectly straight, cutting across the earth for miles. And somewhere beyond that line lies a giant figure, maybe a monkey with a spiraling tail, or a hummingbird with wings spread wide, its beak longer than a football field. The problem is, you can't see it. No one walking here can. It's simply too big, too vast for human eyes at ground level to ever take in the full picture, and that's where the mystery deepens. Because the Nazca Lines aren't small decorations or carvings someone could admire while standing next to them. They are monumental in scale, some stretching over 1,000 feet, others running for miles with perfect symmetry and precision. The hummingbird alone spans 310 feet, the spider nearly 150 feet, and the largest figure, a pelican-like bird, reaches an incredible 935 feet in length. And these are just the animal geoglyphs. The straight lines themselves, some slicing across hills and valleys, extend for more than 12 miles without the slightest curve or deviation. For a civilization that lived over 1,000 years ago, with no modern tools, no aerial perspective, and no way to even see what they were making from above, this achievement seems almost unthinkable. How did the Nazca manage such precision on such a massive scale? That's the puzzle that has gripped archaeologists and researchers for decades. One idea is that they use simple but ingenious techniques. They may have started with small-scale designs drawn on pottery or in the sand, then enlarged them using a grid system. By marking points on the ground with wooden stakes and connecting them with ropes, they could trace enormous figures step by step, one section at a time, without ever needing to see the whole thing at once. This process would have required extraordinary coordination, with teams of workers carefully scraping away the top layer of dark stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath, always following the plan with remarkable accuracy. Yet even if we accept this explanation, the sheer scale still amazes. Imagine trying to walk in a perfectly straight line for miles across uneven terrain, with no drones, no maps, no bird's-eye view, and yet leaving behind a line so straight it could rival a modern surveyor's work. Some of the trapezoids and geometric shapes cover entire hillsides, their edges sharp and clean as though drawn by a giant ruler. The curves of the animal figures flow smoothly and gracefully, without awkward angles or jagged lines, as if sketched by a single hand rather than dozens of workers on the ground. What's even more baffling is that many of these figures are so large they would have taken days, maybe even weeks, to complete. The Nazca people didn't have metal tools or advanced machinery. Everything was done with simple wooden stakes, ropes, and their own determination. And once completed, the designs couldn't even be admired by the people who made them. From the ground, you'd see only lines stretching into the distance, fragments of a shape too big to recognize. It was only from the sky, or perhaps from the eyes of their gods, if that's what they believed, that the true beauty and scale of their work could be appreciated. This has led some to suggest that the lines weren't meant for human eyes at all. Maybe the Nazca built them as messages to deities watching from above, prayers written on the desert floor so large the gods themselves could see them. Others argue that even without flight, the Nazca might have used nearby foothills to get partial views of the figures, piecing together the whole design from memory and planning rather than seeing it all at once. But the reality remains: no hills in the area provide a full view of the largest geoglyphs. Even today, the best way to see them is from an airplane or satellite image, technology that wouldn't exist for over 1,000 years after the Nazca were gone. And it's not just the size of individual figures that stuns researchers, it's the sheer number of them. Over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 animals and plants cover nearly 200 square miles of desert. Some figures overlap, others run parallel for miles without ever touching, as if laid out by a mind thinking on a scale far beyond the ordinary. It's hard to imagine the organization required for such a project. Who planned it? Who directed it? Did the entire Nazca Society contribute to this effort, or was it the work of a specialized class of artists, priests, or engineers? The scale raises another question too: why here? The Nazca Desert's unique climate helped preserve the lines for centuries, with almost no rain or wind to erase them. Maybe the Nazca understood this. Maybe they chose this land knowing their work would endure, that the desert itself would guard their creations long after their civilization disappeared. Whatever the reason, the scale of the Nazca lines wasn't just physical. It was conceptual. It required thinking beyond human sight, beyond the ordinary limits of art or engineering, creating something meant to last for ages, whether anyone ever solved its mystery or not for centuries. The Nazca lines lay silent under the desert sun, barely noticed by the few who crossed this barren land. Then came the pilots of the 20th century, their eyes catching the first glimpses of these enormous shapes from above, sparking a wave of curiosity that quickly grew into one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of modern times. But what began as fascination soon turned into decades of scientific investigation, as experts from around the world arrived determined to understand who built the lines, how they did it, and what meaning they held. One of the earliest and most passionate researchers was Maria Reich, a German mathematician and archaeologist who devoted her life to studying the lines. Arriving in the 1940s, she saw more than random figures scratched into the desert. With measuring tape in hand, she spent years mapping every line, every curve, every geometric shape under the scorching sun. Living alone in a small desert hut, she worked tirelessly, convinced the lines were a kind of astronomical calendar, with certain figures pointing toward solstices, equinoxes, or the rising and setting of stars. Her meticulous records turned what had been seen as mere curiosities into subjects of serious academic study, and she fought fiercely to protect the lines from modern threats like road construction or careless tourists, earning her the nickname the Lady of the Lines. As technology advanced, so did the investigations. Archaeologists began using aerial photography to map the geoglyphs in greater detail than ever before, revealing not only the famous animal figures but also hundreds of straight lines and geometric shapes that had gone unnoticed from the ground. Some were miles long, so precise they looked as though they'd been drawn with lasers rather than by hand over 1,000 years ago. Every new photograph brought fresh surprises: spirals, trapezoids, arrows, and even human-like figures appearing across the desert. Some of them so faint they had nearly vanished beneath centuries of wind and sand. By the late 20th century, researchers began turning to satellite imagery and later drones, uncovering geoglyphs no one had ever seen before. The desert, it turned out, still held secrets waiting to be revealed. Drones flying low over the plains captured images of smaller, older figures hidden under layers of dust, suggesting that the Nazca people had been creating geoglyphs for centuries, evolving their techniques over time. Some of the newly discovered figures were rougher, less precise, perhaps the work of earlier generations experimenting before achieving the perfection seen in the larger, more famous designs. Ground-level studies also revealed fascinating details about how the lines were made. Scientists found that the top layer of the desert soil is coated in dark, oxidized rocks, while the layer beneath is much lighter in color. By scraping away only the top layer, the Nazca people created lines that contrasted sharply with the surrounding desert. Lines that have lasted so long because the region's dry, windless climate prevents erosion. In some places, stones were piled along the edges of lines, forming borders to make the shapes stand out even more clearly. There was no need for carving deep trenches or moving heavy materials, just a careful removal of the dark surface to reveal the pale earth beneath. A simple method with astonishingly durable results. Researchers studying the lines up close also noticed something else: footprints. In certain areas, faint impressions left by ancient feet suggest that people once walked along these lines, perhaps in processions or ritual ceremonies. This discovery supported the theory that the lines weren't just meant to be seen from above, but also experienced from the ground, maybe as sacred pathways where worshippers prayed to the gods for rain, fertility, or protection. Meanwhile, astronomers used computer models to test Maria Reich's theory about celestial alignments. Some lines did indeed point toward solstices or significant points on the horizon, but many others did not, leading scientists to question whether astronomy was the sole explanation. Hydrologists then joined the debate, noting that some lines and trapezoids pointed toward sources of underground water or followed the paths of ancient rivers, raising the possibility that the geoglyphs were linked to irrigation or water worship in a desert where every drop of water meant survival. Radiocarbon dating added yet another layer to the story, showing that the lines were created over many centuries, from as early as 500 BCE to around 500 CE. This meant they weren't the work of a single generation or even a single purpose. The Nazca culture may have changed over time, their rituals and beliefs evolving, the lines accumulating like chapters in a book written across the desert floor. And still, with every new technology, every drone flight, every excavation, the mystery deepens rather than disappears. Scientists can map the lines, date them, and analyze their construction. But the question of what the lines truly meant to the people who made them remains just out of reach, as though the desert itself intends to keep some secrets forever, even after decades of research, aerial surveys, satellite imaging, and the work of countless archaeologists and scientists. The Nazca lines refuse to give up all their secrets. For every clue uncovered in the desert, a dozen new questions seem to rise from the sand, questions that turn this vast stretch of southern Peru into one of the most enduring mysteries of the ancient world. Who exactly designed these massive geoglyphs? What was their true purpose? And why, after centuries of study, can we still only guess at the answers? One of the most puzzling aspects is the sheer commitment of the people who made them. Creating even a single figure would have taken planning, coordination, and weeks of work under the relentless desert sun. Yet the Nazca didn't stop at one or two designs. They covered nearly 200 square miles of desert with hundreds of lines, shapes, and animal figures, some so enormous they can only be seen from the air. Why devote such staggering effort to something they themselves could never view in full? Were the lines offerings to their gods, vast prayers etched into the earth for divine eyes alone? Or were they maps, calendars, or guides of some kind, their meanings long since lost to time? Some scholars believe the key lies in the culture's spirituality. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places on Earth, a desert where survival depended on scarce water sources and the unpredictable seasonal rains. Perhaps the lines were sacred pathways, routes walked during rituals to honor the deities who controlled nature's forces. The hummingbird, the monkey, the spider animals often linked to fertility, rain, or the cycles of life might have been symbols and ceremonies meant to bring balance between the human and the divine. Yet, if this is true, why are so many lines perfectly straight, stretching across miles of terrain as if pointing towards something far beyond the desert itself? That question leads to another theory, astronomy. Some researchers have argued that certain lines align with the sun during solstices or mark positions of stars and constellations. If so, the Nazca lines might have been part of a massive observatory, a way to track time, seasons, and cosmic events in a world without clocks or written calendars. But as modern astronomers examined the alignments more closely, doubts arose. While a few lines match celestial events, most do not, leaving the theory incomplete, a tantalizing possibility rather than a definitive answer. Then there are the lines that point not to the sky, but to the land itself. Hydrologists have noticed that some geoglyphs seem to mark the locations of underground water sources or trace the paths of ancient rivers. In a desert where water meant life, could the lines have been functional maps, guiding people to wells and aqueducts? Or perhaps they were offerings to the gods of water, giant prayers carved into the earth to ensure the flow of life-giving rivers beneath the sands. It is a theory that fits well with what we know of the Nazca's dependence on water, yet it still doesn't explain the massive animal figures, the spirals, or the trapezoids that stretch beyond any obvious practical purpose. And then there are the theories that push the mystery into stranger territory. The idea that the Nazca lines were created as messages or even runways for alien visitors has fascinated the public for decades, fueled by books, documentaries, and the undeniable fact that the designs can only be truly appreciated from the sky. How, people ask, could an ancient culture without flight create something on such a scale with such precision? Did they have help from beings beyond our world, or at least believe they were communicating with gods descending from the heavens? Mainstream science rejects the alien hypothesis, pointing instead to the ingenuity of the Nazca people, who likely used simple tools, mathematics, and careful planning to achieve their results. Yet the allure of the extraterrestrial explanation refuses to fade, perhaps because it speaks to something deeper, a human fascination with the unknown, with the idea that we are not alone in the universe, that ancient mysteries might hold cosmic connections we have yet to understand. New discoveries continue to complicate the picture. Drones and satellite images have revealed geoglyphs older and smaller than the famous figures, suggesting the tradition evolved over centuries, changing in style and perhaps in meaning. Were early designs rough attempts at something that later became more sophisticated? Did their purpose shift as generations passed, the original meanings forgotten even before the culture itself declined? And so the questions multiply. Were the lines meant for gods, for people, or for something else entirely? Were they sacred texts written across the desert floor, astronomical tools, water maps, ceremonial pathways, or messages to the stars? Perhaps they were all of these things at once, layers of meaning built over centuries by a civilization both practical and deeply spiritual, a people who saw no divide between survival and the sacred, between earth and sky, between the human and the divine. And so, the Nazca lines remain one of humanity's greatest unsolved mysteries, etched across the desert floor, silent yet speaking volumes through their sheer scale and precision. We've traced their discovery through the eyes of astonished pilots, explored the lives of the Nazca people who carved them, walked through theories of God's water and stars, and even ventured into the realm of the extraordinary with ideas of cosmic visitors. Scientists with satellites, drones, and modern technology have mapped and measured every line, yet the ultimate purpose behind them continues to elude us. Perhaps that is what makes the Nazca lines so hauntingly beautiful. They are more than just ancient artwork or archaeological puzzles. They are a message across time, a glimpse into the minds and beliefs of a civilization long gone, a reminder that even in an age of satellites and supercomputers, some secrets remain just beyond our reach. Maybe the desert intends to keep its mystery, to leave us wondering whether the lines were meant for gods, for people, or for something far greater than either. As the sun sets over the Nazca Desert, the lines remain as they have for over 1,000 years, vast, silent, eternal, watching, waiting, daring us to keep searching for answers that may never fully come.